Hello everyone, welcome back to Student Simple, where students help students. It's that simple. Today we're going to be going over the number system. Let's start off by going over positive versus negative numbers. On a number line, positive numbers are located to the right of 0, while negative numbers are located to the left of 0. 0 is in the middle and is considered neutral, which means it's neither positive or negative. Think of it as a barrier between positive and negative numbers on a number line. Now let's go over adding and subtracting integers. But before we do that, we need to define what an integer is. An integer is any whole number. This means the numbers 2 or 3 are integers, while numbers like 2/3 or 1.23 are not. Now that we know what an integer is, let's move on to adding and subtracting them. This example is -8 plus 13. We can do this problem on a number line. To solve this problem, we need to start off by finding -8 on the number line. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. -8 is located here. Now we need to jump 13 steps, but we don't know if it's to the left or right of -8. We can determine this by looking at the sign in front of 13. It's positive, which means we're going to be going to the right of -8 on the number line. Let's jump 13 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's landed us right here, but we need to figure out what number this is on the number line. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units away from 0 on the right side of the number line, which means that this number is positive 5. This means that -8 plus 13 is equal to positive 5. If 13 was a negative number, then we would go in this direction to the left of -8 on the number line. Even though you now know how to add and subtract integers on a number line, here are some rules to make this process even more simple. When you see an equation that has two numbers that have the same signs, you're going to keep the sign and you're going to add the two numbers together. For example, if we have 7 plus 20, both of these numbers are positive, which means they have the same sign. You're going to keep this positive sign and add the two numbers together. So 7 plus 20 is 27. Let's say we did the same process but with negative numbers. If we have -5 plus -3, they both have the same sign because they are both negative numbers. So we're going to keep the sign, which is a negative sign, and we're going to add the two numbers together. So 5 plus 3 is 8, which means the answer to this problem is -8. Now, if you have different signs, you're going to subtract both numbers and you're going to keep the bigger sign. What this means is, let's say we had -20 plus 7. This time we have both different signs since 7 is positive and 20 is negative. This means that we need to subtract the two numbers. So 20 minus 7, which is going to be 13. And since they have different signs, we need to keep the bigger signs. Well, in this occasion, you're going to ask yourself, which number is bigger? In this case, the number 20 is in fact bigger, and it has a negative sign. So that means the answer to this problem is going to be -13. Let's move on to multiplying and dividing integers. When multiplying and dividing integers, there are a couple of rules you have to follow. Trust me, these rules will make these operations a piece of cake. Whenever you have two numbers that are being multiplied or divided together and they have the same sign, that means that the product or quotient is going to be positive. Whereas if they have different signs, the product or quotient is going to be negative. Let's say, for example, we have -7 times 6. Well, our first step is to identify the signs of both numbers and figure out if they are the same or different. Since -7 has a negative sign and 6 has a positive sign, this means that these two numbers have different signs. So the product must be negative. Then we can take these two numbers and multiply them like normal. So 7 times 6 is 42, which means the answer will be negative 42. Let's do another example. Let's say we have negative 9 times negative 4. Well, we need to figure out the signs of both numbers and see if they are same or different. They both have a negative sign, which means they have the same sign, and the product is going to be positive. Then we can multiply these numbers like normal, and we'll get 36. So the answer is positive 36. We can also do a problem where we're dividing two integers. Let's say we have negative 9 divided by negative 3. Now we need to first identify the signs of both numbers. They both seem to be negative, which means they are the same, so the product is going to be positive. Then we can divide both numbers by like normal. So 9 divided by 3 is going to be 3, which means the answer is positive 3. Remember, when you're doing these problems, make sure you don't get confused by the signs and just stick to the rules. Alright, now let's move on to absolute value. Absolute value is the distance of an integer from 0. It does not care about signs. You'll see it in a problem when a number is surrounded by two bars. For example, let's say we have the absolute value of negative 17. We can show this on a number line. So negative 17 is going to be located on the left 0 because it is a negative number, and we just need to count where it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Negative 17 on the number line is right here, and it is in fact 17 units away from 0, which means that the absolute value of negative 17 is in fact 17. An easy trick to solve this problem without having to do it on a number line is by just removing the sign, and there you have it, your answer, 17. Alright, let's move on to another problem. Which is greater, the absolute value of negative 9 or the absolute value of positive 6? This problem may look intimidating at first, but it's actually pretty simple. Just ask yourself this: which one is farther from 0? Negative 9 is 9 units away from 0, while positive 6 is 6 units away from 0, which means that the absolute value of negative 9 is 9, and the absolute value of positive 6 is 6. We can show this by removing the sign from negative 9, and you'll see that the absolute value of negative 9 is 9, and removing the sign from positive 6, you'll see that the absolute value of positive 6 is 6. So now we need to ask ourselves, which is greater, 9 or 6? Well, obviously, it's 9. So the absolute value of negative 9 is greater than the absolute value of positive 6. Now let's move on to some word problems. The temperature outside is negative 2 degrees Celsius, then drops 9 degrees. What is the temperature now? In this example, the temperature is negative 2 degrees Celsius, and then drops 9 degrees, which means we're going to be subtracting 9 degrees. So we need to identify the signs of both numbers. Are they same or are they different? They both have the same sign, so we're going to keep the sign, and we're going to add them like normal. 2 plus 9 is 11, which means that the temperature outside is negative 11 degrees Celsius. Here's another example. A submarine is 120 meters below sea level and rises 45 meters. Since it's below sea level, its position is going to be at a negative 120 meters. And it's rising 45 meters, which means we need to add 45 to negative 120. In order to solve this problem, we need to look at the signs and identify if they are the same or different. Since they both seem to have different signs, we're going to subtract them. So 120 minus 45 is equal to 75. Now we need to figure out if 75 is negative or positive. We can do this by figuring out which number is the bigger number. In this case, 120 is the bigger number, which means that we're going to have a negative sign. So the answer to this problem is negative 75 meters. Now let's move on to rational numbers. Well, what is a rational number? Well, rational numbers are decimals and fractions. This means that 2/3 or 1.23 are rational numbers. Let's do an example with rational numbers. Say we have negative 3.5 plus 6.2. Now, in order to solve this problem, we need to look at their signs and identify if they're the same or different. Since they're both different, this means that we're going to have to subtract the numbers. So I can subtract the smaller number from the bigger number. So 6.2 minus 3.5 is 2.7. And we need to figure out if it's positive or negative. So 6.2 is greater than 3.5 and it has a positive sign. So the answer is going to be positive 2.7. Let's do another example, but this time with fractions. Let's say we have negative 3/4 plus 1 1/4. In order to solve this problem, first we need to convert 1 1/4 to a mixed number. This is 5/4. So negative 3/4 plus 5/4. We need to look at their signs. Since they both have different signs, we're going to be subtracting. Except since this is a fraction, we can keep the denominator the same and just focus on the numerators. So I'm going to subtract 3 from 5. And we're going to get the number 2. Now we need to figure out if it's positive or negative. Since 5 is greater than 3 and it has a positive sign, our answer is going to be positive. So our answer is 2/4 or 1/2. This concludes this video on the number system. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching.